Emergency Awesome, Superman trailer 2025, Green Lantern, Henry Cavill changes, and things you missed. Bet. I'm finna watch this. I seen the trailer already. I just watched the trailer. When they gonna start talking about.
During this footage. Everybody rushed to put on your proper colors. It definitely feels like
Yo,
a day
he look
worthy
like?
of face cam. James Gunn already
Did
explained a
not
whole
know
bunch
that.
about what's going on with the character of the
I thought
movie,
he
so
was
we'll
younger.
break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get
I
all the
thought he'd be
videos.
a lot
I'm sure we're
younger,
going to
like
get a bunch more
20
footage of
something. I
this
don't know.
really soon. Probably one of the biggest reveals in the
40.
trailer is at the beginning they show Superman getting his ass handed to him up in the north, probably near the Fortress of Solitude, with him calling for Krypto with like a really high-pitched dog whistle. We get the full-on shot of Krypto, who James Gunn also based on his own dog that he adopted while he was in the middle of making the movie. And you notice that he's full-on bleeding, like he spits his own blood
He got
in the
his
snow.
ass
So he's
whooped.
probably fighting the evil Superman that's supposed to be in this. We actually get a brief shot of him later in the trailer. This is supposed to be him. He's wearing the U on his chest that everybody thinks is a version of Ultraman. My assumption is that he's meant to be like a Superman clone, and it's more of like the comic book origin of Bizarro, where he started out as a clone created by Lex. So once the black mask comes off of his head, it'll just look like David Cornswet, like it'll be him playing dual roles, Superman versus an evil version of Superman that's just a clone. There have actually been a number of stories like that they've done in the animated movies as well too. And because he's
I did
bleeding
not
here, he
know
looks
that.
like he's getting his ass handed to him in a fight, and he says, "Take me home to Krypto." Your mind instantly goes to the Fortress of Solitude. Like, where would you go if Superman was bleeding? Like, he would probably go to the fortress. I believe that teaser scene that
I would
James
go to
Gunn
Kansas,
dropped earlier
man.
this
Never
week
know.
of the circular logo with the Superman logo spinning around was meant to be for like the entrance to the Fortress of Solitude or inside the Fortress of Solitude. There's a bunch of action scenes from across the movie, and probably one of the other big things that we need to talk about because there's so much action going on during this teaser trailer is the actual cinematography itself. It looks a little bit like 48 frames a second, so like the motion looks a little bit weird, like soap opera action. So I'll explain that as we go through some of these shots. But probably one of the other biggest things about this that you will notice that differentiates it from previous versions of Superman like Man of Steel, Zack Snyder, Superman, Henry Cavill, is how much color is bursting from each of the frames. It's like he's cranked the colors all the way up to 11. Couple notable things James Gunn explained too before the trailer came out. He said that it starts in the middle of the action, so like we'll start with like a really big action scene. I don't know if he's talking
It's
about the
cool.
particular scene that they begin the trailer with Superman bleeding all over the snow. He said Lois and Clark already know each other well when the movie picks up. It's not Superman Year 1, it's more like Superman Year 2, kind of the same way
Okay.
that Matt Reeves did with Robert Pattinson's
That make
Batman.
more
Like it
sense.
wasn't Batman Year 1, it was more like Batman Year 2.
That was like
This isn't meant to
year
be an
and a
origin
half,
story,
year and
but
a
it's
half
still
of
relatively
Batman.
early in Superman's career. He said Lex Luthor
Same shit.
already hates Superman. There are a couple shots of them going at each other, like you see Lex with the gun. It's probably a kryptonite bullet in that gun. We get a full-on shot of him, we get a shot of Luthor Corp. He talked a lot about the way they filmed the flying shots during this too. He said that they actually were inspired by Top Gun Maverick with all those flying scenes, and they used a lot of drone shots for those. And obviously, probably one of the other biggest changes in this movie from previous versions, at least recent previous live action versions of Superman, is the actual trunks themselves. Tyler Hoechlin's version of Superman during Superman and Lois wore them briefly, like in the very first episode, to explain like his very early career. Like this is one of the first suits that he made. Like, yes, my mom did help make this suit. But then transitioned to versions of the suits without the trunks. The way that James Gunn explained the trunks in this
I
movie
kind of
is
like
he
without
said when
the
he was
trunks.
actually
I'm be
getting ready
honest.
to make it, he did not want the trunks. Like he was adamantly against using the trunks. It was actually David Cornswet himself that convinced James Gunn that they needed to do the trunks. His reasoning, this is David Cornswet's reasoning, is that Superman wants kids to not be afraid of him because he's an alien with massive, incredible powers, like God tier powers. So he dresses, and this is in David Cornswet's words, he dresses like a professional wrestler. So if you're not a longtime Superman
Did it?
comic book reader, like if you're not familiar with
Green
the
Arrow?
trunks on screen recently, think of it that way. Think of it more as Superman trying to show himself off as more of like a professional wrestler. My assumption this means is that in eventual future movies, he will lose the trunks. Like at some point, he'll get a new Superman suit that won't have the trunks. Also because James Gunn, at least at first, did not want to use the trunks. So it sounds like eventually he'll go back to that. Like, you know what? I didn't want to keep the trunks
That
forever.
make
Like, we
more
won't do the
sense. Who
trunks
is that robot?
forever. But probably one of the other biggest things during all this footage is the very Silver Age sci-fi kind of feel that James Gunn said that he wanted to bring back to DC movies, which gets into a lot of the stuff you see going on in the background, a lot of the shots. Particularly him fighting both a giant kaiju in the middle of Metropolis and all the Green Lantern space-based stuff that's going on, like all the real sci-fi stuff. Just starting at the beginning of the trailer, notice he's wheezing here when he's spitting blood up in the frozen north in the snow. The only thing I think that could make him work that hard, that could hurt him that hard, would be like the evil version of himself, like somebody with the exact same power levels. Thus, we get to whatever they're going to be calling this clone version of Superman. I've already done videos about it because they were actually filming last year, so like we got a good look at it. This is what he looks like in that black suit. One of the funny things about this is the goggles make him kind of look like Doomsday, but the whole idea in Superman and Lois recently in the TV universe is that Bizarro turned into Doomsday in that universe.
Hmm.
So it's like the circle of Easter eggs here, just like tying everything together, like comic book Doomsday with the goggles, with the suit here, but it's more like Bizarro in the original comic book stories where he starts out as a clone of Superman, but in the TV show,
Oh,
he
so he
actually
might
turns
turn
into
into Doomsday. That would
but
be
at the beginning of the
hard.
footage, they jump through a bunch of different shots here.
That makes
Like
more
this
sense
is
why he
him
got
just on a
hair.
normal day. It seems like going to the Daily Planet,
That
going to
nigga big
work.
as
You
hell.
got the weird zoomer fro on top with the glasses. Like this is his Clark Kent look. Notice how tall he is compared to everyone else too. That'll
Yeah,
probably be
yeah.
one of the funnier aspects of the movie when he is walking around trying to pretend to be Clark Kent. But I do actually think it's really good that he is so tall, like he will tower over pretty much every other character that he's on screen with. And I think it's just right that Superman should be like your biggest character. One of the issues they ran into during the Zack Snyder DCEU era of Justice League is that Henry Cavill was notably shorter than Ben Affleck. Like Ben Affleck was massive by comparison. Henry Cavill, though, extremely swole, so that usually made up for it. Like you were mostly just looking at the muscles. You weren't really thinking about how Ben Affleck
I
was so much
I
taller than him.
wasn't
One of the other things you'll
really
notice here
concerned
too,
about his height.
especially when he's
I
walking
didn't
down
think
the
about it.
like the clothing and when he goes into the Daily Planet, is there's a sort of retro '60s look to everything too, which is made to
And
make
I
it
can't believe the
feel a
movie
little
finna
more
come out
classic.
in
Like he wants it to
July.
feel a little bit like the
I'm ready
Christopher
to watch it
Reeve
now.
Superman era too. But this is influenced by a lot of other things too, like All Star Superman, a lot of classic Superman comics. I will say one of my notes about the trailer though is the guitar riffs version
Yeah, I
of the
like
John
that
Williams
music.
theme. Like the whole theme song that plays over the trailer is just a rearrangement version of the John Williams theme, which I do think is cool that he's using John Williams' theme, but the guitar riffs just feel a little out of place. Speaking of music, though, for people asking, because James Gunn is always noted for a lot of his music in his movies, and he does have amazing music in all the Guardians of
Nah,
the
he got
Galaxy
good
movies,
music
for
too.
instance, but he said the Superman movie is not going to have a lot of needle drops in it like Guardians of the Galaxy. It'll be a
Obviously.
more score-heavy movie, like more classical music, like in a traditional Superman movie. We get our first shot of Rachel Brosnahan as Lois
That her
Lane.
name
We get
Rachel.
a shot of the Kent farm with him talking to Pa Kent, who is still alive at this point. This might be before he actually becomes Superman. My assumption is that even though it's not meant to be an origin story, there will be a couple flashbacks just to show you a little bit of his life before he actually became Superman. In the trailer, they use the language next summer it begins because this is really meant to be the traditional beginning of James Gunn's DCU. The way he explained it, he said that basically like the next 10 years of DC movies depends on this movie doing okay at the box office. So much is riding on it. There's so much pressure.
I'm watching.
World's Best Doggo comes in for the assist and like literally drags him back to the Fortress of Solitude because remember, Krypto has super strength and he can also fly. Cannot wait to see some big action scenes with Krypto actually in there, just to see the way they handle the dog in big action scenes. This shot of Superman saving the girl is in the middle of that giant kaiju attack. Not clear when this happens in the movie. Maybe this is one of
That's
the first
probably
real
the
big
first.
action
Yeah,
scenes
that's
that they
probably
just
the
start the
first
movie with.
part.
Notice how much the color pops in this. Like there's so much color here. The other notable thing too is there's a lot of slow motion going on during this trailer. And speaking of which, a lot
I
of
like
people
slow
made fun of
motion in
Zack
that movie.
Snyder for all of his use of slow motion. James Gunn did say that some of this movie is inspired by Zack Snyder's DC movies.
I
He
like
didn't say
slow motion in
specifically
movies.
what
I
parts of the
fuck with
movies
it.
or like what aspects of the movies. He just said they were partially inspired by Zack Snyder's DC movies. Speaking of which, you might remember they actually did work together. James Gunn wrote one of Zack Snyder's movies. We see Lex Luthor about to blow his top as he sees Superman fly by Luthor Corp. James Gunn said one of his big things about this new version of Lex Luthor is that he wanted him to feel like an actual threat, like Superman would be in actual danger,
Yeah,
like,
cause
oh
that nigga.
crap, Superman is
I don't even know
screwed,
why
as
he
opposed to
get. Hold
most
on,
would be
let's
an
talk about it.
actual.
This actor, that was the worst Lex Luthor I ever seen. He wasn't bald. He wasn't intimidating. Ain't this nigga a comedian? Like, I don't know. Like, that was a horrible, horrible casting to me. And when I first seen him, I'm like, who is this? When they said Lex Luthor, what? How the fuck is this Lex Luthor? But
Danger, like,
horrible
oh
casting.
crap, Superman
Horrible.
is screwed, as opposed to most versions of Lex Luthor, especially in the movies, where you're just waiting for Superman to hand him his ass. Not totally clear what's going on here, where Superman punches his way out of this glass here. This might be a containment field where Lex Luthor is just trying to keep him inside this box.
I feel like
It's
the
not totally clear
government tried
what's
to do it,
happening here in this
and
part
he
of the
let
world,
him
but like this little
arrest him
boy just calls
like
out
an
for
official.
Superman holding up the flag. Maybe one of the big action scenes of the movie happens here, or maybe it's just some disaster or some war that's happening in a different part of the world that Superman helps to stop. They also did this during Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, when they're showing Superman just going around the world helping people all over the place.
That
This
big
whole
ass
scene where the
shield, boy.
whole crowd seems like it's turned on Superman, they're throwing stuff at him, yelling at him. This might be when he's taken into Argus custody, because you actually see Frank Grillo's Rick Flag here in this scene with the engineer's character, that evil clone of Superman that's got him in chains and is walking him down the street. I think they're walking him to this building here. Not totally clear what's going on during this part of the
Stag
movie, though, like
Industries.
what's
Sound
happened to
familiar.
lead to this. Big
Stag.
Easter egg here for DC characters, Stag Industries, you probably remember, they actually did this in the Arrowverse. One of his big connections to one of the other big characters during the trailer, we had like a brief shot of him, is that Stag Industries was responsible for the creation of Metamorpho. I believe this
Oh,
is Anthony
Metamorpho.
Carrigan's Metamorpho character here. We
That
get a shot of
that
Nathan
thing is
Fillion's Guy
Metamorpho.
Gardner, Green
I would
Lantern,
not guess
and he
that.
does
I'm
have a
too used to
version of
the
the
colors.
bowl cut. Like, this is so crazy. I was not expecting him to have this haircut. Does look a little bit silly, so we will see what his personality is like.
I
How
don't
close
like
it is to the comic book
the
Guy Gardner.
green
Hawkgirl walking behind
Green
him in the
Lantern
lobby here.
costume.
Then you see her flying through
I
the
just don't
air
like it.
using her mace. This
But this
also
just
might
start
be
off.
connected to the big kaiju fight. And I think this is meant to be Superman here because you see his cape blowing in the wind in front of the kaiju here. Not totally clear where it came
It
from,
look like a
why it
baby
came to
kaiju. I
Metropolis
don't
in
even
the
think
first
that's the
place.
real.
Then it looks
But
like
it's big
Superman and
threat.
Lois in her
I don't
apartment or their
know.
apartment if they're living together already, getting ready to actually get it on, like they're getting ready to kiss. Behind them, a whole bunch of action going on.
Like, what
I
is
think
this
this
big
is meant
ass
to be
thing?
Guy Gardner's Green Lantern fighting someone, giving off all the purple energy. It could be a Star Sapphire. It could be something else giving off this energy. Another shot of them getting it on, completely different part of the movie. So it seems like when the movie picks up, they'll already be a couple.
Okay,
Not totally
W.
clear what robot here he's actually holding. Like, the robot seems sentient, so this could be from the Fortress of Solitude. We get a larger exterior shot of the Fortress of Solitude rising up with all the crystals. Like I said, I think this is meant to be Metamorpho. One of the big things they also said is that a lot of his effects are done practical, although obviously they're tuned up with visual effects later. This big fight with all the buildings could either be Superman fighting his evil clone, or it could be during the big kaiju fight. Like, there are a couple of big fights in the movie,
Well,
so
I
there are a
don't know
couple
how the
reasons
hell they
for
getting out of
Metropolis
that
to get
building,
partially
boy. They are
destroyed. This
up.
seems like Lex
You need
Luthor
the
much later
flash
in
to
the
come
movie, though, with
here,
the cuts
boy.
all over his
It's
head.
over.
Almost seems like he's been crying a little bit too, like not sure why he's so upset here. Probably because he lost in some big way against Superman. This news broadcast about Boravia is actually a place in the DC universe from the Superman comics, like way back in the 1930s, talking
Damn.
old Superman comics, debuted in
1930.
Superman #2.
Out getting YouTube ads.
Oh man, ad
blocking
of
ads
death.
with
The
Copy.
ad of death.
The internet is almost unusable with how many ads.
What the fuck is my mouse? Man, I can't see that motherfucker.
Within context, it's meant to be a European country that's just torn by civil war. My assumption is that Superman just does something to help bring peace to the country. We get the shot of Krypto dragging him to what looks like the Fortress of Solitude. This person in black is supposed to be that evil version of Superman. Notice
I
the
would've
hard
never
time
guessed
he's
that was
giving
the evil
Superman in
version
their
of
big fight here
Superman.
in the middle of the
I just
stadium.
thought it was some
If he's
strong
going to
nigga.
wind up being a clone of
That
Superman,
Argus
they will
got.
have basically the exact same powers, or should have the exact same
Ooh, what if
powers.
it was like
We get a full-on shot of Mr. Terrific.
Adam?
He's supposed to be a really big character during the movie, according to James Gunn. Notice that his suit looks very similar to Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner's suits. They also have the logos on them from Maxwell Lord's company, who's being played by Sean Gunn, James Gunn's real-life brother. They kind of seem like a proto version of the Justice League, but more like the Justice League International mixed with the Terrifics from the comics. But
Okay.
James Gunn said
Okay.
when the movie picks up, the Justice League does not
Listen,
exist. Like
that's
they're
why
not
they
even
got
close
that
to
suit
actually
on. I'm
forming.
like, I
Not
want the
totally sure who's
original Green Lantern
protecting here,
fit.
but notice
Miss
the field
Fantastic
that's
look
around
great.
it, like the force field is being
That fit
generated
look
by
fire.
his T-spheres from the
It's
comics.
like his fit.
Superman and Lois having a floating kiss wouldn't be a Superman movie if they weren't kissing midair. We get the
That
big takeoff into the sky, and then they watch the fight going on in the background of their apartment. All this green energy radiating behind Superman in the darkness is probably Guy Gardner's Green Lantern. And that is our first trailer. If there's any big Easter eggs or references that you spotted that I didn't
thousands
talk
finna
about in
die,
the video,
boy.
just
That
write them
building
below in the
falling
comments.
down.
We'll get more footage soon
Ooh-wee.
that'll tell us a little bit more about what's actually going on during the movie. But there's going to be a ton of stuff baked into this. I'm sure we're going to be talking about this for a while, so make sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of those videos. Everybody click here for my Henry Cavill Warhammer video, and everybody click here for my Boys Season 5 teaser for a very different spin on the whole Superman character. Thank you so
Okay.
much for watching, and I'll
Ooh.
see you guys in the next one.
Got a lot to say for a 2-minute trailer, but fuck it. I am out. Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a sub for me. That's on Twitch. I don't know. I'm probably gonna take this out.